Hey, hi, hello everyone. My name is Angelina, aka Bittersweetener, and you don't know me, but if you did, you would know that I have a degree in sculpture. So it's been a little over 4 years now, um, since I graduated college back in 2021. And for a while, I've been wanting to film this video about whether or not art school is worth it and worth going to, from my personal experience. So if you if you still try, if you either didn't go to art school and want to know if you missed out on anything, or if you're thinking about going to art school, watch this video. I'm going to be, I have my notes written down, but I'm going to be extremely frank about how I felt about art school and my own opinions. They are, at the end of the day, my opinions. So I would hope that you would make your own decisions based off of yourself and what you feel is right for you. In general, I think that college is a scam because it no longer guarantees that you're gonna get a well paid job, especially in with our job market right now. There's lots of degrees that people are getting that they can't find a job a year, 2 years plus after the jobs in their fields are not available. And it's so expensive to go to college. So yeah, I think college in general is a scam. However, when I was in high school, my parents really pushed me to go to school. Um, my mom didn't finish college, and my dad did, but not until later in life. I think after I was born. So they really wanted me to continue my education. This was a big thing. So I was, even though I had these views that college is a scam, I still ended up being pushed to go to school. So I decided, um, mostly on the thought that, um, from what I gathered, most people end up regretting what they studied in college. So I figured if I study something that I actually care about and that I'm interested in, I'd be less likely to regret it. So even though like I could have majored in math or science, I decided to go into art. I ultimately have very mixed feelings about whether or not that whole experience was worth it. I think that if I could go back in time, I probably would not have gone to art school and I would have done something else instead. And I'll explain what I think, what I would recommend other people do, and what I would have had myself do. First, I'm going to tell you the reasons why you should not go to art school. The first reason you should not go to art school is because college is expensive. And art school in particular, I really don't think that you should go to. Unlike traditional college, you can sometimes get around some of the extra costs by getting, um, by renting books, by getting free PDFs online. But you really can't do that in art school outside of the academic classes and any of the studio classes. It's extra expenses of a very varying degree, for these courses you'll take. For example, there were a bunch of like intro. In my school there was an intro to painting class that one of my friends wanted to take, but the professor wanted everyone to get one very particular brand of paint that they were only going to use for one assignment. And it was like $200-$300 for a set of paint that they were never going to touch again. And I just think that that's kind of ridiculous as a concept, first of all, because you're already paying so much money to be there and you won't even get the supplies. But that's also with college in general. So like, whereas you can't, you might be able to find a PDF and articles for free. You cannot get a thing of stoneware clay for free. And like, you can't even, like, there's some things that you can get secondhand. Like sometimes people will resell the paints from the last class they took, or things like that. But you can't really do that with everything because once art supplies are used up, they're used up. You know. My second big reason to tell you to not go to art school is that you should not go to art school if the job that you want doesn't require a degree to do it. So if you want to get into like architecture or teaching, or you want to do like art administration, gallery type of work, then I would, or like art history, then I would say definitely 100% go to art school, because that's where you're gonna get the education that you need, the certificate that you need, and such. But if you want to be a studio artist, or you just want to get into galleries, or you just want to start your own art business, I would highly, highly recommend you not go to art school, because it's just not strictly necessary. You could literally start a business tomorrow, whether or not you went to school. Which comes back to, if you want a very well-paying job right outside of college, you should not go to art school, because again, unless you got a degree where it's directly linked to employment, then it's going to take you quite a while to get to a place where you can where you're financially stable as an artist. I know 4 years on, I'm still not even close. It takes time, resources, and honestly luck to get to a point where your work is paying all your bills. My last main reason not to go to art school is that it is incredibly draining. So for most students, art school, art college is the first time where you're exclusively working in the arts. You know, your academics have to do with arts, you're working on your projects, and that's your main focus. Many studio classes, like I know at the school I went to, run at least 5 hours long, if not longer. And then on top of the classes, you also have to spend a large amount of time outside of that working on your projects, your homeworks, your coursework. And that is, it's a lot to focus on all of that. I know for me, and I know for most people, I think I could say for most people, when you get to art school, you're surrounded by artists, which is really, really cool and exciting, but also can put you into a position where you're very much constantly comparing yourself to other people. And that's not always exactly productive or helpful, and can really like hurt your self-esteem um and your confidence as an artist. um a lot of art school is doing critiques, usually really long critiques, where like at least halfway through you don't know what the hell you're supposed to be saying about other people's art. And you're like, it puts you in this mindset where you're constantly trying to figure out what's wrong with what you're doing, and how to fix it, instead of enjoying the process. And I just think that, especially right outside of high school, most people are not emotionally prepared to deal with that. Especially if you have a particularly mean professor who's just gonna rag on your stuff. Most people can't handle that kind of like face-to-face critique about something that you poured like literal time, energy, and emotion into. It's like a constant pressure to make good work, or at least good enough that your professors will be okay with it. And I think that that's just not good for the art making process, because you really have to make mistakes in order to make art. Most of my peers, at least from my friend group who graduated with me, are not making art anymore. Because school is just that draining and just like creatively mind numbing. Just because of all the pressure, it just sucks the joy right out of it. Even me personally, it's taken me 4 years to seriously get back into making art. Um, and even then, I'm not creating in with the consistency that I would like. Um, and I do chalk that up a lot to like the mental drain and depression that I got shot into right after art school. there's a very famous drag queen who graduated from my college, and I know a few years ago, I think, she did an artist talk at my school. And even she was like, yeah, for like 5 years after I graduated, I was, as most art graduates are, deeply depressed, and I did not do anything creative. Um, so that's like a real phenomenon that happens to a lot of people when they go to art school. Most of this I have on notes, but this is one thing I just want to add um, as well, is that if you are a person of color, most art institutions are extremely white, and I met a lot of racist liberal white people of middle and upper class who just left a really bad taste in my mouth. And I grew up in the Bronx, New York, so I grew up around other black and brown people, and it was very much a culture shock for me. And just a lot of the people who were in my cohort really just disgusted me because of their actions and lack of like self-awareness. Because I feel like when you don't face any kind of adversary in your life, you tend to be very unself-aware. So having to deal with people like that is another reason why I would recommend not going to art school. Because something that one of my freshman professors said was because some white boy threw together, like, you could tell he threw this project together very last minute, and it looked like shit, and it had like no thought behind it. Like it was pre-slop era slop. And he held it up and he said, hey, just I want you all to think about the fact that this dude is getting the same degree that you guys are. Some of these people are just here to be here and not here to actually do and make things that they're not here to expand upon themselves or their creativity. Maybe I'll make another video at some point about like the worst shit I saw at art school, because I have stories about the weird upper class white boys, the piss boys. Oh, that's a story. Okay, so now that I've convinced you not to go to art school, here's what I would do instead. This is what I would do if I could go back in time and not go to art school. This is what I would do instead. I think, as an artist, we should all learn art history. Although not imperative to making art, I think it's very, very important to have at least a basic understanding of art history. A lot of people like to shit on modern art and contemporary art and paintings like Rothko and other like abstraction painters and such. But I think you gain more of a respect for that, and just like a more of a respect for different kinds of art when you understand the art canon and the history of how we got here in the art world. And it kind of makes it more fun to shit on some of the bad art in the art world when you know the information. Like it's kind of more fun to shit on Picasso when you learn how much of an asshole he is, and how he's always hailed as like this amazing cubist painter when he's like wasn't the one really who who started it, you know. It's more fun to shit on Warhol when you know art history. So like you should understand like the art canon of like the Renaissance era, modern art and how it got here. And also this is usually not in the it's not in the required courses of a typical art education, but especially if you're white, you should learn about art from other cultures and areas in the world. Islamic artists you should look into. You should look at like Mesoamerica art history. I took this amazing class, um, which was the history of folk art, I believe. Um, and yeah, it's like you have the very white art canon, and then you have like a very diverse and beautiful exploration of creativity when you get away from that. Art is not owned by white people, it's owned by every single person. All culture like requires there to be art. um it's just part of human nature. So I think it's good to have a very well-rounded understanding of what is there around you and what has happened before you. You could read books, you can take a class, you could I know there are hundreds of videos on YouTube about different types of art history, different eras, different artists. um you know, art doesn't stop at Vincent van Gogh and Bob Ross. You know, there's so much more that you can learn about, that you should learn about. Additionally, another thing you could do is go to an art museum. That's my second thing of things I would do. I would go to every single art museum near you. I would take trips to go to other art museums, and not just go once or twice, but go multiple times. Art school is expensive, and I know going to museums can get expensive, but it's cheaper to go to museums multiple times than it is to pay tuition at art school. The cool thing about museums is that while you can go and look things up on Pinterest to look at and to recreate and draw to expand your skill set, I feel like there's a lot more to be gained for you to see things in person and try to recreate them that way. If you have the opportunity to, you should do it. Look at it, recreate it, try to understand how it was made, read about how it was made and why it was made, because these are things that can very much influence your own art practice. The next thing that I would recommend is to take a live modeling class. Those are the classes where you get the live nude model to come and you draw them, and they do different poses and you draw them in the different poses. This is one of the classes that you take in art school. That's one of like the fundamental classes everyone takes. It is so important to learn how to draw. Caveats of like not being able to physically, I think that knowing how to draw is a fundamental thing that every artist should know how to do. Like, and I don't not mean that as in like you have to be able to make highly realistic things, but live art classes really train you on how to look at color value and shading things and understand how to translate 3D elements into different forms. Especially if you could turn a 3D element into a 2D element, I believe you can do anything. It helps you understand proportion, size, shape, textures. And I think once you understand those very core basic principles of art making, you can literally take that and do whatever you want with it. And on top of that, another thing that I would very highly recommend you learn about is color theory. Color theory is another fundamental of art and art making. One of the classes that I took was color for object makers, and how color works on a 3D plane, and like the different kinds of color combinations and how they work. When you're working in things that require color, like graphic design, painting, sculpture to an extent, anything else. Understanding a good palette and how to mix colors and make colors, and how colors and feelings relate to each other, and all the things about color is very important. And it's just very important to know. I think my art, if I think learning how to draw live, the live models, and my color classes are the things that I think have impacted my art the most. Another thing that I would do instead of going to art school is to use online resources. There, there are hundreds of videos on YouTube about how to draw, how to do very specific things, how to cast plaster, how to build, how to carve wood, how to make puppets, all that sort of stuff. You can find that online somewhere. Another thing that I would learn, that I honestly got a very, very bad version of this in art school. I actually had to go back and teach myself how to do this much later afterwards. But if you understand the basics of photography and how to take a decent picture of something, and also at least the very most basic photo editing skills, which I think since the invention of Instagram, people have gotten much better at that generally. Those are two skills that are really good to have. I would suggest that you, instead of going to art school, I would suggest looking for courses and classes. Sometimes you can get a class in a college without actually being registered like as a full student. And sometimes there are like small studios that offer classes in different mediums and stuff, and I think those are really good ways to get access to facilities that you would not normally have access to if you weren't part of the institution. Online learning is very effective, very useful, but sometimes you need someone else to really walk you through something. The last thing that I would just generally suggest is to experience life. Get to know people from different backgrounds. I know school in general is a place where this happens for a lot of people, but also just like working a minimum wage job, joining a club, meeting people, going out, experience life. I feel like that is so important to art making, is to live your life if you can, especially if you have not faced any adversity in your life. I feel like having experiences, negative or positive, really is what helps people create, because in my opinion, art is what happens after you filtered life through your silly little brain and decide to make something new that doesn't exist yet. Also, personally, I think I would have gone to trade school and learned like I would have gone into like carpentry or woodworking, because I think I would have paid well enough for me to be doing better right now. So yeah, I would highly recommend, if you don't want to go to regular college, that you go to trade school, because tradespeople are highly skilled and always in need. So yeah. So to sum up, would I recommend anyone go to art school? Probably not, unless you can afford it. And you don't need to go to art school to make good art. So yeah, that's everything I have to say. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have your own experiences or questions or something to add, drop it in the comments. I read all my comments. Yeah, subscribe if you want to see more of my face. I have more videos planned very soon. And if you're on Tumblr, my Tumblr is listed below as well. Alright, see y'all later. Bye.